The first harbinger, the tower. Can I get you something else? She asked. Something other than water? No, I'm fine, he replied. I apologize. I should have asked you when you first came. The water's fine, he replied. So, she said, changing her pace and tone. He gave you the seal of the first harbinger, and what was on it? Images and markings, just like the others, but its central image looked something like the Tower of Babel. And how would you know what the Tower of Babel looked like? She asked with a trace of friendly skepticism in her voice. I don't, he replied, but I've seen pictures of it. The image looked like a ziggurat, terraced, terraced tower, terraced tower, with each terrace or story getting smaller and smaller as it rises. And what did you make of it? I didn't know what to make of it. I looked it up, everything I could on the Tower of Babel, but there was nothing I could find to connect to the seal. I went back to the bowl in Isaiah 19, but there was no mention of a tower. I was going nowhere, as you were before. As I was before, except then, I didn't realize I was going nowhere. This time, I was going nowhere, and knowing I was going nowhere. I guess it was some sort of improvement, but it's easier to go nowhere when you don't realize that's where you're going. Where you're going. So what did you do? I put the two clues together, the image on the seal with that what he told me. What he told you was what? When I asked him how I would know the first harbinger, he told me it would be hard to miss. It was the largest one. So there's the image of tower and the clue that the first harbinger is the largest one, the largest tower. So I went to the largest standing tower in New York City, the Empire State Building. Yes, to the 86th floor and outside to the observation deck. It was early evening, a windy day, just around sunset, with thousands of lights just beginning to appear throughout the cityscape. I walked around deck, gazing at the skyscrapers in every direction, but there was nothing that struck me as being especially significant with regard to the coast. I was standing on the south side, looking out to the city's lower end. To my left was a man viewing the same scene through one of the metal telescopes they have there. The ones you have to pay to look through, the ones with timers on them. Impressive, the man said. It's an impressive view. Yes, it is, I answered. So many towers. When I heard the word towers, I turned around. It was him, the prophet, looking through a telescope on the observation deck of the Empire State Building. The same. And you didn't notice him before that? I was looking at a view, not the people, and his face was hidden behind the telescope, but his voice. Yes, but out of context, I wasn't expected to hear it. The prophet continued, it has a beauty to it, he said, still gazing at the scenery, a strange beauty. Don't tell me you just came up here to take in a view. I said, actually, I had an appointment, he replied. There's no point in me asking you how you do all this, is there? I asked. My guess is that it involves satellites. I was being fastidious, of course. You're right, he said. That it involves satellites? No, he replied. That there's no point in asking. How long have you been here? Long enough, he answered. I was wondering when you'd get here. The clue on the seal is a tower, right? It is a tower. That I have it right this time. Is the Empire State Building. No, he replied. You've gotten it Wrong again. What do you mean? It's a tower, the largest tower, and you're here. The image on the seal is a tower, but the Empire State Building is just the place of our meeting. But you said it was the largest one, the largest of the harbingers. Then the first harbinger is in a tower? I didn't say that, but it is in this tower. How many towers do you see out there? I have no idea, many. And to which one do you think the steel points? Just then he looked it up from the telescope. His time was up. He turned to me. Do you need some change? I asked, half fastidiously. I'm okay, he answered. He began walking along the deck. I walked alongside him. He turned again to take in the view. I did likewise, so we both stood there in the wind, looking out at the vast expanse of skyscrapers, more and more of them, now dotted with yellow lights and set against the deep red and blue background of the sunset sky. And where were you now on the deck? She asked. Still on the south side, facing lower Manhattan. Uriel, he asked, where are we in the prophecy in Isaiah 9:10? The bricks have fallen, I replied. They rebuilt the first harbinger, but where are we now? What comes next? The bricks have fallen, but we will rebuild, he said, completing the sentence. That's the key to the first harbinger. It does sound very revealing. Remember, it's not. It's not just the words, but the context surrounding them and the spirit behind them. The problem wasn't the rebuilding, the problem was the spirit and the motive behind the rebuilding. They had just been given a critical warning, but they respond with defiance. But we will rebuild is the first declaration of that defiance, from which will come their judgment. It doesn't only say we will rebuild, I added, it says we will rebuild with hornstone. What's that about? What's the significance? The fallen bricks were made of the clay and straw. They were brittle and flimsy. They would be replaced, but not with more clay bricks, but with something much stronger, hornstone. So a building made of stone would be much more resistant to any future attack. Exactly, and it could rise to greater heights. So the hornstone signifies their intent to come out of the attack stronger than there before it. Yes, again, all of our defiance. Instead of being humbled by the calamity, they become emboldened by it. They vow to build bigger, better, stronger, and higher than before. Not only will they continue on their course of apostasy, now they will do it with a vengeance, with a defiance. So instead of bowing their heads before heaven, they raised their fists against it. So what happened? I asked. They clear away the heaps of fallen brick and rubble and begin the reconstruction on the ground of their devastation. The project is filled with symbolic meaning. It represents the nation's rebuilding of itself and its rise from the ashes. The vow would become reality. New buildings, stronger, taller, bigger, and better, would rise up in place of those destroyed in the attack. So the new construction would become a concrete manifestation and witness of nations' defiance of God's call. Taking the seal in his right hand and lifting it up, he began to explain. The first harbinger, in the wake of calamity, the nation responds with a repentance. humility or reflection, but with pride and defiance. Their leaders vow, "We will rebuild." They pledge to rebuild bigger, better, taller, and stronger than before. The rebuilding takes place on the ground of destruction. The construction is instead intended to be a symbol of national resurgence, resurgence, resurgence. It is set to rise up from the ruins of that which had fallen and to surpass it in height. It will be their towering testament of defiance, the rebuilding of the fallen and of the nation itself, the fourth harbinger, the tower. So if the ancient mystery is joined to America, then somehow 911 has to be linked to the words "we will rebuild." Correct. In the wake of their calamity, the leaders of ancient Israel proclaimed, "We will rebuild," the first sign of defiance. If the mystery holds and has now applied to America, we would expect to hear the same vow, the same three words in the wake of 9/11, now proclaimed by American leaders. And did it happen? Did they say it? Yes, they said it. Not that it wouldn't have been natural to speak of rebuilding, but the way these three words continuously came forth from the mouths of American leaders, spoken over and over again in public proclamations, was striking. From the mayor of New York City, in the wake of attack, we rebuild. From the state's senior senator, we will rebuild. From the state's governor, we will rebuild, and we will move forward. From the state's junior senator, we rebuild. From the city's mayor at the time of the rebuilding, we will rebuild, renew, and remain the capital of the free world. From the president of the United States, we will rebuild New York City. One way or another, its leader would end up proclaiming the same words of defiance, proclaimed thousands of years before by the leaders of ancient Israel. And as with ancient Israel, it wasn't just the speaking of words. That's correct, Nuriel. The words were followed by action. So what happened after the words were spoken by the American leaders? The words were likewise followed by the action. The ruins of 911 were cleared away. Then a sign appeared at ground zero with these words: "A new icon will soon rise above the lower Manhattan skyline, the Freedom Tower." The tower, exactly. It would become the center point of the rebuilding, and the sign called in an icon. It was meant to be a symbol of the rebuilding of ground zero and the nation. It was to be the icon of defiance. Defiance, the word comes up again and again in the commentaries to listen. It is the defiance of a people who, far from being repentant, glory in their iniquity. To be heedless when God is speaking by whatever voice He may address us is surely iniquitous enough, but to act in deliberate defiance of the Almighty is, by many degrees, worse. Proud defiance of God always brings disaster. Long before the rebuilding began, while the dust of the attack still hovered above the ground of devastation, an American senator would foretell the meaning of the future campaign. I believe one of the first things we should commit to, with the federal help that underscores our nation's purpose, is to rebuild the towers of the World Trade Center and show the world we are not afraid, we are defiant. Is it about the leaders then? I asked. No, said the prophet, not especially. Then about those making the proclamations? No, he repeated. These are the prophetic reenactments or prophetic manifestation, the first of many. And though they involve people, they are not about the people involved. Those involved act unwittingly without realizing what they're doing as representatives of the nation, agent of the national spirit. These are prophetic signs of and to a nation. So the campaign to rebuild was not about any one person or any group of people. It was the will of a nation, the manifestation of a national spirit. One journalist would describe it this way: rebuilding Ground Zero was going to be America's statement of defiance to those who attacked us. A statement of defiance, exactly what the ancient war was, a statement of defiance. Of defiance and boasting from the commentarist. They rise upon the ruins of their broken bones, boasting that they will show the enemy, whether God or man, that they can take it. 2,500 years later, the governor of New York would proclaim the same thing from the pavement of Ground Zero. Let this great freedom tower show the world that what our enemies sought to destroy stand taller than ever. From the words of the commentaries on Isaiah 9:10. They boasted that they would rebuild their devastation country and make it stronger and more glorious than ever before. From the words of the mayor of New York in response to 9/11, we will rebuild, we are going to come out of this stronger than before, politically stronger, economically stronger. These were all verbatim. Asked Anna, actual quotes? Yes. And what did you think when you heard them? It was every modern America leaders voicing the same thing voiced in ancient Israel, and words that had to do with judgment. It was every. And what else did he tell you? He spoke of the difference between restoration and defiance, which is to replace bricks with bricks is restoration, he said, but to replace bricks with the cornerstone is defiance. To rebuild what was destroyed is restoration, but to boast of rebuilding stronger and greater than before is defiance. The first harbinger is not simply about rebuilding what was destroyed, but it most especially involved rebuilding bigger, taller, stronger, and better than before. The distinction is clear in the scripture and in the commentaries. Since their houses had been destroyed, they would build bigger, better, and finer ones. So, it came out in the words of those attempting to rebuild Ground Zero. One of the nation's most prominent real estate magnates said, "This of the proposed project, we should have the World Trade Center bigger and better." From the commentaries on ancient Israel, if they ruin our houses, we will repair them and make them stronger and finer than they were before. From the American magnates on the rebuilding of a Ground Zero, what I want to see built is the World Trade Center stronger and maybe a story taller. You see, in real, even if by just as little as one story, it was not about rebuilding, it was about defiance, just as it was in ancient Israel. From the commentaries on the meaning behind Israel's rebuilding. They are determined to withstand God and rebuild on an even grander scale. Now, in the words of one observer, the meaning behind the rebuilding of Ground Zero. The developer who holds the lease has vowed that the towers will rise again. It would show us defiant in the face of terror, unbowed, climbing again, gleaming into the sky, taller, bigger, stronger. Notice the word unbowed, climbing into the sky, taller, bigger, stronger, defiant. In other words, the rebuilding of Ground Zero, the tower, would be the embodiment of a defined nation, just as in Isaiah 9:10. He even used the word vote, correct? It was a vote and a boast. In fact, for a time, they even boasted that the Tower of Ground Zero would overshadow every other building on earth. Isaiah 9:10 to the extreme. And what happened to that boast? It would ultimately be thwarted, but that's how it began. The rebuilding of Ground Zero was supposed to have resulted in the tallest building in the world. A question, I said. I understand the tower as a symbol of the reconstruction, but is there any place in Isaiah that actually speaks of a tower? Centuries before the writing of the New Testament, the Hebrew scriptures were translated into Greek. The result was a Greek version of the Hebrew scriptures called the Septuagint. The Septuagint version of Isaiah 9:10 renders the rebuilding project in even more specific terms. It says this: the bricks are falling down, but come, let us build for ourselves a tower. How does this happen? I asked. How does it all come together? The words of the leaders about the tower, it's amazing, as if it's all part of some kind of a reenactment. The reenactment of an ancient drama of judgment, he answered. A reenactment in which none of the players have any idea they're doing it. With it, he became silent, and we both gazed out into the vast expanse that surrounded us, now darker and more aglow with lights. And so, he said, breaking the silence, out of the ruins of the nation's calamity emerges the fourth harbinger, the most colossal of harbingers, the tower, and the most soaring testament of defiance ever to stand on American soil. And again he became silent and just stood there on the deck in the wind, looking up into the light and darkness of the cityscape. A strange beauty when you look at it from here, he remarked softly. Then he opened his hand. The seal of fifth harbinger. I took it, examined it, then placed it in my pocket. What can you tell me about it? I asked. It's harbinger of foundations. Where do I find it? Away from here. You're sure you're not giving away too much information? Far away from here.